Hi there. Welcome to Bourbon Turntable. We are the show that blends the love of music with the love of whiskey. With me tonight, as always, is my good friend Drew Crawley. What's up, Drew?
Hey, not a whole lot. Just a lovely weekend here full of music and good friends and drinking, and enjoyed some thunderstorms with the puppy on my chest, napping on the couch today. So 10
Very nice.
stars on this weekend.
Good. Good. Sounds like a good one. We
Yeah.
have a very special guest host with us, Jolee Kasprzak, aka Red. What's up,
What's
Red?
up? What's up? How's
Welcome
it going?
back. Good. How are you?
Thanks. I'm doing good. I'm doing well.
Yeah. Okay. The world wants to know, where's Andy? What's he doing?
Andy is on the couch watching Twin Peaks.
Twin Peaks. Now, that's an interesting choice.
Right.
Awesome.
Yep.
Love it. Okay. Well,
Yep.
we'll have to talk with Andy about Twin Peaks some other time.
Okay. All right.
But,
We'll follow
hey,
up.
today we're going to be talking with Lenny Eckstein of Deerhammer Distilling. Before we get into this stuff too deeply with Lenny, because we've got some great stuff to talk about, we have a few other things that we want to share with you. First of all, we are part of the Bar Cart Co-op. Bar Cart Co-op is a collection of friends that have some wonderful whiskey content for you. We've got Distillers Talk, which is Alan Bishop and Christy Atkinson. Those shows usually drop Thursday or Friday each week. They're talking with distillers all over the country. They've talked with Lenny before. That was a great show. My Whiskey Den is on every Monday night at 9 o'clock. That has Mike and Patrick and Ben. Alan's got another show that he started. If you have ghosts, you have everything. And that is delving into the supernatural, paranormal, spiritual side of things and how that ties in to what he does in distillation. And then you have our show, Bourbon Turntable, where if you like music, if you like whiskey, then we're the show for you. And we have one more very brief announcement for you.
All right. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification to find out when new episodes come out, which is every Wednesdays on all of your streaming services everywhere. Apple, Spotify, whatever other ones there are, and the YouTube where you can watch the live recording itself.
Thanks, Mike. Always a staple of the show. Does a great job for us every single week. Without further ado, Lenny, welcome, buddy.
Thanks. I'm stoked to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm really looking forward to this. One thing, I met you through ABV Network and the shows there, and one thing that's always stood out to me about you, or one of my impressions about you, has been you're not afraid to try anything when it comes to distilling. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's a fair statement. I mean, I think it could be to my detriment. It's a lot safer to, do what's known. But, we like to be left to center, and sometimes we go so far left. I mean, the only rub about it that's tricky is it takes 3 years to know that you went too far. So now that we've been doing it for 12 years, we're starting to find our stride pretty nice.
Well, we've got quite a lineup to work through tonight. And so pray for us while we drink. Because we've got a great sample of things. We've got a straight bourbon whiskey, a rye whiskey, American Single Malt, a mead cask finished single malt, and a port cask finished single malt as well. So this was going to be a lot of fun. So what?
Can we just take a minute to talk about how beautiful those bottles are all lined up together?
Mm-hmm.
Just look at that. Look at that. The detail on the bottom edge on the top neck wrap matches the detail on the bottom.
Yeah, Jolee, you probably get this. Our printer hates us. I mean,
I'm sure he does. Yeah. I'm sure. This is not the right Pantone.
Yeah, but no, it's fun. My background was in, design and, a lot of online design, some print, but it's fun to bring. I feel like everybody who jumps into distilling brings something, and I feel like that's what I brought. Mm-hmm. And I've always wished I brought background in plumbing or boiler repair, but graphic design maybe the third best thing to bring to the table.
It's okay.
Yeah, I'm getting
They
better.
look great. They look great. They
you.
stand alone. I love the colors, how they're a
Mm.
little muted. They're not super bright. Yeah, I love that. I
Oh,
love
thanks.
the little details on the neck wrap, and I don't know. Yeah, with your clear cap, I dig it with a clear capsule. I like it.
Yep.
I think it looks great.
Yeah, well, like packaging or just grain bills or any part of the process, I think like that's been one of the really rewarding things in owning a brand is
Yep.
it can be a self-expression. Like you don't
Mhm.
have to make up something. It can just be
Right.
what you're all
Right.
about. So that's all I know.
Right.
I love it.
And we're going to get started with some tasting, but I've got a follow-up question to that. But what Jolee and Drew and I are going to start with is the straight bourbon whiskey, which I have here. And we'll start on that. So, Lenny, if you don't mind, while we're doing that, while we're doing the hard work here, the heavy lifting, can you tell everybody a little bit about your background and how you got into distillation to begin with?
Yep. So yeah, like I was just saying, my background doesn't go back forever in beverage alcohol by any means, but pretty early on in my early 20s, I got real keen on making beer and learning everything about the process and everything about grain and fermentation, and realized that was becoming more by far more of a passion than sitting behind a computer all day, pushing pictures around. And it's a long story, but the short is really like one process looking for what's next led to the next, and ultimately an appreciation of whiskey. And at the time, I was really digging a lot of stuff, a lot of Scotch, a lot of single malts coming out of Scotland, and having such a passion for working with malted barley. I started down the path of, not just the mash and fermentation, but then the distillation on a small scale.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about 2010 that I decided I was going to do this no matter what happened, even if it failed miserably, which I thought it would. I didn't think it was going to really work. I just figured, let's give it a shot. What's the worst that'll happen? I can't be a graphic designer anymore because I'm becoming a terrible employee. Being over it. And I thought, if it doesn't work, it's a hardware store down the street. Somebody will hire me, bike shop. I wanted it to work. So gave it a go. I think Deerhammer might be one of the most shoestring cobbled together distilleries that ever was. Maybe there's like a few that did it for less dollars, but we were definitely in the running for lowest budget distillery ever. And at that time, I was making 1 barrel a month, one quarter cask a month even. So not sustainable. I think that was the path to failure in my job at the bike shop. But my wife was kind of like, she was helping me bartend on the weekends and kind of taking enough notice to see what was going on and realize my napkin math that structured it out wasn't going to work. And after about a year of running, it was the tasting room was doing great. Our distribution was terrible, but a local bank was willing to step in and help us out with a pretty good size expansion. So we're still super small, and we still focus on American Single Malt for sure, but we do make bourbon, which you guys are sipping on now. But now we make about 1 barrel a day. And, considering we don't make whiskey in the summer, we're usually about 200 barrels a year. Most of our stuff, our labels say 2 years on the back typically, but we don't pull anything under 3 years now. And we're pulling a lot of 4 year. We just haven't updated our labels. We're sitting on a bunch of old ones, but that's kind of that's the round. I mean, we've been going at it for 12 years now, and it's been interesting.
Well, Jolee, Drew, thoughts on the bourbon?
It's so unique. It feels like Colorado. There is a cedar note in there that's really prominent. There's almost like a barbecue briskety kind of a
yes.
Yes,
I
would
sure on the brisket.
Love this at a campfire. 100%. This would be what I reach for. Oh, I think it's delicious.
So let me give you a little breakdown of this, and it's gotten more than less convoluted over the years. We started out, like I said, making American Single Malt, but it didn't take long before we had our equipment fabricated. So it has a false bottom so we could separate the liquid from the malted barley, but we also had it made so that we can pull the false bottom out and run it like a cereal cooker. So we always wanted to do bourbon and rye, and we do corn whiskey. But again, in approaching this, the philosophy is always to look at what's awesome out there and how they're doing it. And then, bring into the whole equation what will work, but what could bring value, what could be interesting. So at the time, and I think this was too far left of center, our thought was like, hey, no one's doing a smoked bourbon. Let's do that. And this is 7 years ago. So our oldest, and we've since gotten away from that, but this does pull about 30% or so from our older barrels. So 4 to 5 year barrels that are a grain bill consisting of, I'm gonna get the exact proportions wrong because they've changed over the years, but approximately 60% corn. And it's, it's a different style of corn than the yellow number 2 commodity. It's grown down in the Four Corners area at Ute Mountain Farm. It's a,
Nice.
food grade corn. So 60% corn, 20% wheat, grown, just an hour and a half from us over in the San Luis Valley. 10% oats, which we cold smoked in-house with hickory wood. And the rest was chocolate malt. Now,
Oh my gosh, dude.
Pretty bonkers grain bill. The idea was like, let's not make a Kentucky bourbon. But again, a little too far left to center. So over the years, we've gotten rid of the smoke, and we reserved that for our smoked corn whiskey only, which I didn't send you, but that's a really neat expression. We've upped the oats significantly. So we're at about 20% or higher, depending on the year of oats, but we still maintain the 4-grain bourbon grain bill of the corn, wheat, oats. And now we're using crystal malt instead of chocolate malt. We use a blend of Crystal 45 and Crystal 120. So basically malted barley that's kilned extra long to give it some really cool flavor notes, some raisins, some honey.
Are you still hickory smoking your oats?
Not for our bourbon, but
Okay.
so ongoing, we're eventually going to have like a, like flavor drift as our batches go forward, because we're going to phase out some of those barrels that do have some hickory smoked oats. But we're really excited about our new stuff. And the youngest contribution to what you're tasting is kind of young. It's like, I think like 2.5 years. There's a little bit of that in there, but that brings like a lot of nice molasses character, in my opinion. And kind of just balances it out a bit. So
yeah, I get that dark molasses on the finish. The smoke from the brisket kind of starts to wane, and there's a sweetness that's there, and I think that must be where I'm getting that molasses.
I'm gonna have to find a bottle of that. That's gonna be a cold weather go-to for me this winter.
What I was gonna say, like I like to associate sometimes like months or music, but in this case, I feel like this one's like late November. Just kind of fits in when things are cooling off. Yeah.
I don't know, Drew. I was sitting here thinking, like, what is that note? What is that note? You're like pulling brisket out of there. Like, I don't know how you did that, but that nails that smoky that smell is like, yeah.
I mostly just make shit up. That's
You nailed it, dude. You nailed that tasting. Andy's in love with it too. I can see Lenny. I can see Alan raves about your stuff. He loves your stuff. I know you've sent him stuff before, and I can see why. Like it's so unique, and those flavor notes in there. I can see that being right up his alley. But I mean, it's fantastic.
Thanks. I mean, this is to me. I mean, and this isn't really our cornerstone expression, but everything we make, I think this is what's fun about being a small distillery that, while we always grow slow, we don't have ambitions of taking over and, having billboards everywhere. But what's nice about not doing that, and the reason why, is like, I feel like this bourbon would be like a mother to have to sell across the country to explain to people why it tastes nothing like everything else. But, when the majority of our production is American Single Malt and we're selling, I can't even remember how many cases of bourbon a year, hey, it works. It lets us, goof around, have fun, and be creative about things. So I think that's what's rad about craft distilling to me.
I have a follow-up question to that, just because obviously single malt is your primary focus. How much does that play in with scheduling still time and, dry housing grains and, the smoking process? I mean, what's the turnaround process on that like?
Well, I don't know if I'm going to answer this right, but it's varied through the years. Like, so we're a small distillery in the middle of, we're in central Colorado. We're in this really awesome mountain valley, but it's pretty rural, and we don't have, while a lot of farms are clamoring to get spent grain or mash from distilleries, it's not that easy for us. And when we find a good relationship with a farmer, like, we hold on to it and we do everything they want. Because if we ever don't have the means to get rid of our spent grain, I mean, I don't know what we're going to do. Like, we'll just stop in our tracks. So, in a sense, our production is kind of driven seasonality wise by our American Single Malt can go, works well in the winter because that grain that's like just wet, damp, crushed grain, they can shovel out in the winter and it's okay. But the totes of mash that are basically like a liquid slurry, if they don't get rid of that quickly, it freezes and then it clogs the tote. That, if they had a better system for conveying it, it might be all right. Now,
that's so interesting that your production would be dictated by the getting rid of spent grains. I would have never put those two puzzle pieces together and thought that
wouldn't
was
have either.
The main thing.
Yeah. It's weird and it's awesome. And I do really enjoy like the relationship with the farms we've worked with. The one we're working with now is awesome. And they have a much better system for getting rid. Well, I should say, like, last year, I forgot where me and my family, we were out of town. And I think we came back to find a trail of yellow all the way down Main Street in Buena Vista. And we were like, what is going on? And we used to have like a 900-gallon tank that sat in the back of their trailer, and something went wrong and the valve was open and they just spilled bourbon mash all the way down the street. And the deer came out from everywhere and they're just like sitting there feasting on Main Street. So it doesn't always go well, but as of late, they figured out, and they'll take our mash at any time of year now, be it, the louder, like the grain that isn't liquidy or the other one. At this point though, it's a mix of like working with the farm. And also, I kind of mentioned this earlier. We don't produce whiskey in the summer, not bourbon, not single malt. It's kind of tricky when we have such a busy tasting room and people are walking around everywhere, and we're trying to rake out, spent grain from the mash tun, and people are trying to sneak by to get to the bathroom. Just perils of having a very compact distillery, but yeah.
Well, let's take a pour of the rye now. And
these sample labels are really nice.
And I'll tell you,
good job, Kevin.
Bourbon Turntable.
That was fun.
Yeah, exclusive.
Oh, look at that.
So this is our latest, I guess, vatting. It's like blending of barrels that we put together for Rye Batch 6. And the reason why I threw that in there, rye has been an absolute work in progress. Kevin, so I don't know if everybody got the samples, but I sent 3, I believe, expressions of different years that we pulled.
Yeah, that was what I didn't see when I was divvying up the samples. So they don't have that. So
he just kept them for himself, Lenny.
Well, I
just kept them for himself. Yeah, he didn't see them.
Yes.
But it's funny because like I gave you a sample of, and again, like they all are what culminates into this, but our first year rye production, we made like, 30 barrels of our very first grain bill. And, when people say like, well, have you ever like screwed up on a massive level? And I like always ponder, because I'm like, yeah, a lot. And let me think of what am I willing to say publicly? And, with a few drinks, I've said more than I should have publicly. But what I would say is that first year rye was a colossal screw up. We went so hard in the paint on smoked oats and chocolate malt and just all these like dark, deep flavors. Now, we didn't make a bad whiskey, but we definitely didn't make a rye that was something that could come to market, unless you like called it like a cigar blend or something. And
right.
But I sent you that sample because what I really like to think of it as, now it's 6.5-year-old rye whiskey seasoning that we use for our subsequent blends. And you might only put like 5% or 10%.
Interesting.
But yeah, this rye is a blend of, 6.5, 3.5, and a little bit of 2.5. And what's interesting about that 2.5, and I think I sent you a sample of that. I could ramble forever on weird experiments we do. Anybody who's heard me in this past year, I pick a new subject to rant about, not intentionally, it just happens every year. And this past year has been what is sweet mash versus sour mash. So I decided to start doing some experiments. And the 2.5-year rye that I believe you have a sample of, Kevin, is representative of what we call a super sour mash. So not only do we add a ton of backset, but if you've ever heard of the process, like if you've tasted a sour beer that's kettle soured, the gist of that process is you do your mash and then you let that mash sit. You don't cool it down. You just well, it does cool down, but you let it sit for like 24, 48 hours. We let it sit for 48 hours, brought it back up to just about a boil, cooled it down again, and then fermented. So pretty outrageous process. I was questioning whether it impacted it or not. It's one of my favorite barrels we have right now, even though it's only 2.5 years. It's got such cool character. So interesting. I don't know. But again, this rye that you're tasting is a culmination of all of those.
Okay.
This is another just over the fence to me. And I promise I'll say something not nice if I find anything not nice to say. I'm not just here to gas you up, but this to me it's Honey Nut Cheerios and those little peach gummy ring candies. It's just that peach note comes through so strong, and the honey is there. You can taste some of that oat influence. Man, it's delightful.
I mean, I'm the first one to say not nice things about all the whiskeys I put out. And I don't know. I mean, it's not cool to do that when one is like meeting with a distributor or a liquor store. But I'll do it with you guys. I mean, I'll say I always want it to be better. Like whether it's maturation or like, shoot, let's tweak it in this direction. I love our 2.5-year rye right now, but it's only 2.5 years. We're not going to put out that on its own, but it does lend a nice brightness to the blend. What keeps me going is the excitement, I guess, of what we've done right versus what we've done wrong and where that takes us in the next few years. And I mean, I like messing up because if I didn't, I wouldn't know how far left or wherever you could go. It's just hard. It's kind of crazy to do that with whiskey.
Do you keep records of everything that you try and what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it, why it was a success, why it wasn't?
Oh, those legs?
Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
I mean,
we
so
do keep
oily.
Good records. We we use I don't know, a lot of folks who run distilleries are familiar with the various software packages that you use to track your production. And we use that to keep really solid notes. Now, Kevin, you brought up something like, which ones we loved. And we kind of stop at the production. And then, I don't know. I mean, if I ever fall off a mountain, then I guess some of that will be lost forever. But some of the guys I work with keep pretty good mental notes on that stuff.
Well, first of all, don't fall off a mountain.
Yeah.
Okay. Everyone would be very disappointed at that. But
there's something to be said for no one else being able to replicate what you do, though. I mean,
my wife would disagree.
That's what makes it. That's fair. I get that, but for a small distillery, and that kid, I mean, that's one of the benefits of being a nano micro distillery, right? Is that you can turn on a dime to do something different. If people can't replicate what you're doing, I mean, that's,
Yeah, I would say both that and I approach, the way Deerhammer goes is it's really life. If it's not fun, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
And sometimes that bites me in the ass when it comes to business. But with regards to making whiskey, like myself and, Mike, my production manager, we'll work together on a lot of the blends of barrels. And like you guys have our single malt pour cast finish. We just blended that up. I actually sent you like a rough cut of that. The final blend happened just a couple of days ago. And Mike, we decided, he was like, well, it should be 15 gallons of this barrel, like not even full barrels. We were like adding fractional amounts. And I told him, I was like, Mike, don't measure 15 gallons. Just dump it when you think it's 15 gallons. That's good. Because I honestly, I don't know. I like the process of roughing it a little bit. It's kind of what we're about.
Leaning more into the art aspect of it necessarily than the science.
Yeah, I mean, like you can't get away from the computers completely, but a little more hands, a little less computer.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this one's kind of dangerous, this rye, because it has that nice sweetness, that fruitiness that Drew talked about, and then it goes to you get a little of that smoke after it, and
You know what's fun?
And that's something that you could just sit there and kind of wash, rinse, repeat.
Well, like I mean, the legs on that, it's so viscous. It's so, I mean, it coats your entire mouth. And then I had a sip of water afterwards, and it's still on my back palate. I mean, it's definitely, the notes are there, and there is like an herbal note in the end. I love it.
Yeah, and I guess I should comment, like, with regards to the grain bill here, it's probably drifted a bit from the 6.5 year contribution compared to the mid, like, 3.5 year. But in general, the grain bill is like 70% Elbon rye. Again, like just grown one valley over. 20% oats and 10% mix of chocolate malt and crystal malt. So I think like a heavy hand of oats lends a lot to the texture.
Yes.
It's, again, like an approach of looking at what's done in rye. Like, there's a lot of 95.5 rye out there, and it's tasty. But
is it?
I'm a funny one on that. It takes a lot for me to sip on something and be like, nope, that's just wrong, and I'm out. And I was talking to one of our bartenders about that. Someone brought in a gin from another distillery, and she asked me, she's like, well, how do I tell them that it's not good? And I was like, well, I mean, I'm not saying this is a guarantee always, but I was like, well, you don't, because it is good, because it's got to be pretty damn bad not to have redeeming qualities on some level. And even if, well, not for a gin, but for like, let's call it like a bourbon or rye or whatever, or a single malt, maybe it being better might mean a couple of years, or maybe it might mean, damn, what if they went into a really light char barrel instead of a heavy char barrel, or but I'm such a sucker for finding redeeming qualities, because I think for me, that's the game, is the potential, because it's not, it's not a painting that you hang on the wall when it's done. It's done at some point, but you can always make it better.
Right. Yeah. You just do what every whiskey reviewer says and say it would make a great cocktail.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had this sample that Alan had given me at some point in time. I don't remember. And I drank it, and I was like, ooh, this is like not good. And how do I say that? Because I'm not going to blow smoke, especially up his ass.
Yeah.
So I was like, is this yours? And he was like, no, so-and-so did it. And it was, I don't know if it was a home distillation or something, and I was like, okay, that makes a lot more sense. But it was like, okay, the nose is really good, the front palate's really good, and then it just goes to like IPA bitters in the end. And I was like, it really just needs way more time in the barrel. Like, but I was still trying to find redeeming qualities about it, especially when it's coming from a craft distillery, or, you're like, what they're putting into it. You don't want to be like, this is shit. Because, there are things that you can find that you like about it. Overall, it might not be your thing, but I do that too.
Yeah, it goes both ways, but I don't know. I tried, once I sent Alan a 7-year-old barrel-aged gin that I would say, I don't think it's good, but it's interesting is the word that usually gets associated with when something's not good, but it's got something that's worth talking about.
Right.
I thought it was interesting. I've never had a 7-year barrel-aged gin until I made one.
but see, that's part of that seems to be part of your process, though. Even when you produce something that you think, okay, this isn't good, you're still looking at it and saying, okay, what can I learn from that to make something better the next time? So when you're tasting somebody else's stuff, it may not be that good, but you're looking for, okay, what about it is redeemable? What about it can you take and say, okay, this is something to build on?
That's something that I brought from, oddly, from home brewing, where you're making such small volumes that, like, let's say I made a pale ale, and unless it's infected and just flat out flawed through and through in that way, if it's, under hopped or too dry or whatever, like under attenuated, I would always, rather than chucking it or just giving it to friends I don't like, I would say, like, I'm going to intentionally brew its counterpart and put them together and make the right beer.
Okay.
And I feel like I do that with our expressions of whiskeys as well. Like, I never set out to make something that's, you know, in a sense, too far left field or too bonkers. But does it have something that, you know, while I might not spend a year distilling and creating a whiskey that will counterbalance, you always look for, like, can this bring what it needs, and like lend sweetness and all of those things.
Right.
I don't know. That is my approach. I like.
That's a
again,
great
I think
approach.
you can do that.
That's an approach that is healthy for the whiskey industry, both, I think, for producers, consumers, reviewers, critics. You know,
I mean,
you may not like everything.
Yeah.
But okay, fine. Is there something in there that is okay? This is something positive to talk about, rather than, okay, let's go to the negative so we can get a lot of clicks.
Yep. Yeah. And another, like, what was interesting about the journey as well, like when we started out, I don't know. I mean, I think I used to, I don't know how else to put it. I used to hate on blending when people would talk about the merits of blending whiskey. I would hate on it because I would say, like, are you guys kidding me? Like, is it really hard? Or like, are you glorifying the process of being like, good, 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 bad, good, good, put it all together?
Right.
But I would say that from the place of, well, I didn't have enough whiskey or variables to really pull something interesting together. My process was, I wish it was all better at a year and a half old. So I'm going to pick the lesser of all the evils, and these 4 barrels are going together. Well, it was like a cop out. I was just trying to make myself feel better. The reality, I fucking love blending. I love picking out, like, you know, whether it's all our 4 grain bourbon or a crazy expression like we do. Again, we'll get to it, but our Progeny series every year is a collaboration with other producers. And in some cases, we do so many different things. And the idea is, well, in 5 years, we'll see where they're at, and we'll see if we can put a good blend together. If we can't, they'll just sit forever. But, you know, it's that's become a really, really fun part of the process.
Yeah. Well, let's right now, let's pour a sample of the American Single Malt. And while you're doing that, I want to tell you about the Kentucky Bourbon Benefit. Now, a couple of weeks ago, there were some very destructive flooding over in East Kentucky. And as has happened before, a group pulled together, the Kentucky Distillers Association, Fred Minnick, the Bourbon Crusaders, and Westport Whiskey and Wine came together, and they've sponsored an online auction. That online auction, as this show is released, has ended. However, you can still go to the website, which is www.kybourbonbenefit.com, kybourbonbenefit.com, and you can make donations to help in the flood relief in eastern Kentucky. There were a lot of people that were severely impacted by that, and once again, the bourbon industry came through to help out. So take a minute and click on that website and make some donations to help people that are less fortunate than ourselves. So as we get into side B of the show, we're going to start talking with Lenny about some music, and this is going to be fun because it always is. It's always fun to talk with people about what their music background is, what they enjoy, and how it impacts them in their daily lives they're not musicians, you know. So we're going to be sipping on some of the single malt. But Lenny, first question I wanted to ask you, and it's the first question we ask all of our guests about this: what was your first concert? You remember?
Yeah, I do. Well, first memorable one anyway. I'm sure I was at one when I was like, 3. But I saw Michael Jackson and most of his siblings. 1984 Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia. Very memorable show. Wow. So that was, I think I was in 3rd grade. So yeah, I still have like some memories of that one. It was badass.
You saw the Jackson 5 perform in a stadium when you were in 3rd grade.
Sure did. Yeah.
That's amazing. Best answer yet. Best answer yet.
Yeah, that's up there.
No, nobody said my first concert was Elvis, okay, or the Beatles at Shea Stadium. We haven't had that as an answer yet, but that's a pretty good one.
Yeah. But then like it was a drought after that because like when you're in 3rd grade, you don't really get in the car and go to too many shows. I think the more reasonable span of shows and age, like when I was driving or my friends were, there was a lot of like I grew up in the I'm like 48 now, so I grew up through the 90s and a lot of like where I grew up in outside of Philadelphia, a lot of punk, hardcore, indie rock stuff. But, a lot of like driving into the city, there was a venue that closed fairly recently called the Trocadero that was like the go-to almost every weekend. We were going to whatever show was there. So a lot of like, I don't remember the first show I saw there, but there was a lot of like Fugazi, Helmet, Rancid, Alice in Chains, saw Soundgarden there. Like just... awesome. Amazing shows. So it was a really cool way to grow up during that time. And a lot of fun.
That's good stuff. Do you remember the first album that you bought?
Oh yeah, I do. Well, I could go. I'm going to go back actually to the same thing of the 3rd grade thing. I didn't buy this one, but I thought it was funny because it stuck in my head. I never forgot that I received this. I remember going to the store with my mom and my sister, and I had a record player at the time. Maybe tapes are around, but this is so embarrassing to say, but it's funny. I got a 45 of Pac-Man Fever. Do you remember that? Yeah, I played the shit out of that record when I don't know how old. That one didn't count though. The one I actually bought, first album, a record store down the street from me that I rode my bike to, I bought actually on vinyl, like I'm gonna say, and maybe I can go through like a tape or CD as well. But first vinyl was Dead Milkmen, Big Litters in My Backyard. I don't know what I did with that. I wish I still had that. But, good first album. First tape that I can remember buying was Ice Cube, America's Most Wanted.
Nice.
Very cool.
Yep, that was pretty good for a kid living in the suburbs to try to understand. And I remember the first CD. Like I was pretty late to the game and having a CD player, but the first CD I bought was REM, Automatic for the People.
Oh man.
So, yeah, kind of a mix of stuff there.
I'm just falling more and more in love with you and your music taste. The more you're talking, I'm like, we're best friends now.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's fun to be pretty diverse in music. I feel like that's, what fuels all creativity is like you can follow one direction, but you're always going to go in one direction in whatever you're doing. So we try to be all over the place at Deerhammer, and I think that music is the same way. Trying to bounce around a lot.
What about what are you listening to now? If we got in your truck to drive to town, what would be playing on your radio or on your
a friend from Philly just turned me on to a new release. It's a collaboration with Black Thought and Danger Mouse called Cheat Codes. I had not heard of it, but I've not stopped listening to it since he told me. I would highly recommend checking it out as soon as you hit end meeting. Yeah. Fantastic stuff. I'm a big, like I always, I like everything, but being from Philadelphia, I always had like an affinity for the Roots, like seeing them on the like smallest stages and then ascend to where they're at now. And big fan of like Black Thought and just awesome lyrics. Been listening to that. Been listening to Run the Jewels a lot as well on the kind of hip hop theme. Love those guys. And I just this past week, again, another Philly thing. Had some friends fly out here and we went and saw a friend of ours. I don't know if you guys know Amos Lee.
I feel like I've heard the name. Yeah.
Guy's amazing. Singer-songwriter. His band's amazing. But they came out. He's touring right now, and he played We went out to see him in Vail at an amphitheater and then at Red Rocks. And first of all, the guy's amazingly talented, like amazing singer-songwriter. His latest album's called Dreamland, came out maybe, I don't know, a few months ago, 4 months ago, maybe less.
What's his genre of music?
It's like, well, I don't know.
It's a little bit of everything, isn't it?
It kind of is, yeah. But it's like, I don't know. I think of it as like if I'm driving across the country, I'll listen to it. It's like very road trip oriented music where you're just looking for like honestly, like just really pretty songs, like really well written stuff. And it does kind of bounce around a lot. I'm not going to sing some of the songs that you've probably heard of his, but if you just like snoop them on Spotify, you'll recognize songs. Really cool music to watch at Red Rocks from behind the stage, looking at the audience when it's like raining a little and it's super windy and there's smoke and it's like really cool vibe. Like that was, yeah, I've seen a lot of fun shows, but that was a neat, you know what's cool about it? Actually, like, I mean, that vibe was awesome, but afterwards I was chatting with him and his keyboard player, piano player. And I was saying, I was like, I make whiskey and I love that, what we do is like, we get to kind of make experiences happen, but I really like doing it because I can sit in the background. Nobody has to see me. I just like kind of shove the stuff forward. I'm like, don't worry about me back there. Whereas these guys, they kind of get to, first of all, their form of entertainment is a lot more healthy. People are never going to forget the experiences, but they're also like, they're there with the people, like they're having that experience. So it's a neat way to, give your own, like what you create to people.
Let's talk about this American Single Malt for a second, and because I've got a follow-up question on that.
So, dude, like, I mean, cheers to American Single Malt almost being legal, because I think like it's been 12 years of my wife being like, "Why are we making American Single Malt when everybody wants bourbon?"
Hold on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I had to preempt everyone with your single malt sucks before they.
These stickers, they I love this one.
Yes, I like that one a lot.
Too
as well.
young and expensive since 2010.
Yep, that's
right.
Now,
this one is my favorite.
Craft as fuck. We're known
And
for that
also,
one.
like, I tell everyone that comes to Indiana and says that no one can make bourbon in Indiana. I'm like, there's a distillery in Colorado that has a T-shirt that says "No one cares that you're from Kentucky," and here is the same way. I know you're an hour away, but no one gives a shit.
It's fun. I mean,
I love the
people take it
attitude.
too
I love
seriously.
yeah.
I love Kentucky, but I love making fun of everything also.
Yes, agreed.
But American Single Malt, I mean, folks have asked me now that the government is proposing their definition, and it's looking like it will be the next recognized style of American whiskey, which I think is great. And people say like, well, why did that take so long? But I do think it's valid. Like, when we started, we weren't at the forefront of making an American Single Malt, which there is like, when we call it that, the government's take is, well, it's a malt whiskey. If you want to say American Single, that's cool, but that doesn't mean anything. That's just a fancy.
You mean you, as in Deerhammer, wasn't at the front of it, or like?
Well,
what do you mean by that?
We were at the front. Yeah, good question. We were at the front with a bunch of other folks. I mean, in Colorado, Stranahan's was the first, but when they did it, with all respect to them, they approached it as like, nobody cares about single malt. Like, it's Colorado whiskey, and I can't remember, maybe 4 years ago, they turned the corner, like, you know what, we're rebranding. It's now Stranahan's American Single Malt, or Single Malt at least. And there were a few others definitely leading the charge. Westland started about the same time we did, but went a little, bigger. But I don't think there were enough players. There weren't enough expressions to really justify tapping on a government office's door and saying, hey, why don't you write up some new laws for us? But now that you look at it, and I don't know how many producers making a whiskey that consists of 100% malted barley made by one distillery.
Right.
And there's a few other rules, but that's the gist of it. There's so many now that, of course it makes sense. You know, like people have heard of this thing called Scotch or single malt. If you say single malt, everyone knows the word single malt. So to me, it only makes sense that we do that in this country, and we do grow a lot of malted barley here. So I'm stoked that it's finally.
So your opinion on the standard?
Yeah. In terms of like what's being issued and if that's the right way they should go.
Right.
I'm almost all for it. Well, I should say I'm all for it. They could write damn near anything, and I'd be like, yes, as long as it's a thing. But if I had my way, I wasn't super big initially on American single malt being permissible to go into used barrels. I thought I really, I know a lot of people question it, but I like that bourbon has to go into charred new oak, rye has to go into charred new oak. And if you want to make something else, that's cool. You just call it an American whiskey. I like the impact. To me, that's an American thing. No other country is crazy enough to do that or make it a law. But I've softened on that because we did put some single malt to used barrels, and it's pretty nice. We still go, I would say, at least 90% heavy toast number 2 char for our single malt. But I'm okay with the permissibility of it going into used oak now. The one thing that I'm a little hung up on, but it'll hopefully go away, is that they do allow for the addition of, I can't remember the exact wording, but like harmless colors, flavors, additives, which paves the way for caramel coloring, which there's not a lot of harm in that, but it just opens up the door for doubt and honestly, fuckery. But I think I like everything else pretty well. I like that it's and someone pointed out to me a fact that plausible factor, and that is if distilleries can now use their ex-bourbon barrels or ex-rye barrels or whatever for American single malt, maybe a lot more will get on board and think, rather than selling these off either to Europe or to breweries or to be cut in half for planters, they can get another run out of them, like 4 to 6 years with American single malt, and they get one more barrel out of it, or not barrel, but you know what I mean.
Right.
So if we see the heritage brands jump on board, like I was talking to Connor Driscoll about it 6 or 8 months ago, I ran into him. He was all about it. I mean, he wasn't saying that they're going to necessarily jump on board with it from, Heaven Hill having an American single malt, but man, that'd be badass.
Yeah, it'd be really good for the industry, I think, as a whole.
I think so too.
As it catches on with the crowd, as the expression catches on with, or the classification catches on with the public, the big distilleries are going to race to do their own, and so it'll just be a matter of time before everybody else is jumping in that genre.
People are tired of bourbon, dude. People are tired of bourbon, and they're tired of not being able to find what everybody hypes to be the best thing. You can't, there's so many blends, and don't get me wrong, like I love some of the blends, like what Foregate and Buzzard's Roost and Penelope, some of those things that where they're, getting their stuff and then maybe doing some secondary aging or finishing. I love a lot of that. But there's so much MGP in the market now that's just flooded. You really have to, I don't want to say be careful, because it's not like MGP whiskey isn't good, but there's so many new labels coming out that I don't know. I just kind of feel like bourbon nerds are taking over. And once they have exhausted their resources on information and there's none to be found, and the hyped brands you cannot find.
Yeah.
Unicorn hunting was such a big deal, like 2 years ago, and I think people are just over it now. And so I see a lot more people moving over to craft distilleries because they're excited about like what you guys are doing. You're like, oh well, let's try this corn, let's try, this wheat was grown an hour and a half from us. Like, you're bringing the terroir of Colorado to your whiskey and to your bourbon and your single malt. But that single malt, I mean, that's right. And your bourbon was great. That single malt blew it out of the water.
Mhm.
Yeah. And this is what we're, we make, usually about 60% of our annual production is single malt. The rub with that is if it says bourbon on the label, it's going to sell. So even though we make a fractional amount of bourbon, it's like selling as much as our single malt. So it's hard to.
For
taste
now,
that. Yeah,
I think that's going to change. I think that with or without this, government designation, don't get me wrong. I think it's cool. And part of me loves the vagueness in there. So you can have a little bit more fuckery involved, which is a lot more fun from the distillery's point of view. But I think people are just going to get tired of it. I just see that kind of trend of people getting, don't get me wrong. I love bourbon. I own a lot of it. I buy a lot of it. But once I've been introduced to Scotch, I'm like, oh shit, like it's never ending,
Yeah. I mean, something I've been thinking about a lot lately, like on a music metaphor. So like try to follow me on this and I'll probably, go a little weird. But if like Wild Turkey is the Allman Brothers and I don't know, maybe Four Roses is the Grateful Dead. And these are all like, Jim Beam might be Rolling Stones or something. I don't know. Those are probably bad ways to match it, but let's just call them that. That's awesome. And they are so good. And I can listen to that music a lot. But if I'm a distiller, a craft distiller, I can, if I make the same thing they do, I'm just a cover band. Right. And like, I don't want to be a cover band. Like cover bands are cool, but like I want to do my own damn thing. And that's to me, that was why I wanted to get going in this was what is American Single Malt back in 2010? I don't know. I want to be part of what makes it what it is. And, making one barrel a day, we might not be changing the world, but I get to put my thumbprint on the category. That's pretty cool for me. I don't think I'll do too many cooler things in my life.
Along those same lines, see a lot of those bands partnering with new generation in order to keep themselves relevant. And so there's a little bit of like the big guys are like, is it Beam or that's put a like, isn't Freddie No making like a $18 million craft distillery? Like no offense against them, but like that's not what that is. Anybody in the craft industry can be like, what's $18 million? Like,
right.
I don't know. Maybe he bought a Porsche to drive around the distillery. I'm not sure.
Maybe.
But what I'll say is badass to me about what they're doing there. I love that they just put out, correct me if you guys know better, or I'm stating this wrong, but a 2-year matured bourbon that they did it with the connotation of like, well, the reason why we're putting out a 2-year bourbon is we took a small cut off the still. We're going into the lower barrel proof. I was like, yes, that's what we do. That's how you make a great bourbon without having to let it sit for 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
And
then they put like a leather cuff around the neck and charged $150 for the bottle.
Which I like even more. Please charge more. Please do that. It makes my too expensive Colorado whiskey since 2010 seem a lot more affordable.
Right? I mean, they're trying, but that's the thing is that they're trying to do what you're doing because they see their audience dying off. They see their audience shifting. And now they're trying to partner up with some younger craft distilleries to figure out how do we stay. I mean, Four Roses is going to be relevant forever, but it not necessarily at the forefront of what's exciting about whiskey, in my opinion.
But to your point, Lenny, Freddie No does the Little Book series.
That's right.
And Little Book Chapter 6, which it may be out now. If not, it should be out pretty soon. But it's a blend of a 4-year straight malt whiskey finished with cherry wood staves, a 4-year straight malt whiskey finished in apple wood smoked barrels, 4-year straight malt whiskey finished in hickory smoked barrels, 4-year straight malt whiskey finished with maple wood staves, and 5-year Kentucky bourbon.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard about that. I can't wait to get a bottle. And I mean, what's really interesting to me too is like, so like, how are they making? Where did they get that malt whiskey from? Are they making it in the manner that they would make their bourbon in terms of like cooking it, or are they getting it in the way that was made, the way we do it, but the way it was is traditionally done in Scotland, where you're not cooking the grain, you're lautering or siphoning off the liquid. And
I don't know if the components in the blend are all coming from Jim Beam, or if it's from somebody in the Beam Centauri family.
They've got a few options to pull from.
Yeah. So
just a couple.
Right. But at any rate, this is not your standard big bourbon release by any means.
No.
And a lot of the chatter amongst the bourbon bros is, why do I want this 4-year malt whiskey? Why would I want that? It's only 4 years. Why does malt whiskey? And so it will be very interesting to see how well it's received. It'll be more interesting to see what it actually tastes like. But again, it's big bourbon. That needle is moving.
Yeah.
That big bourbon is seeing, okay, we've got all this activity and this interest and this creativity going on in the craft side of things.
Mm-hmm.
How do we capitalize on it?
Right. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I mean, I like all of it. I like, there's nothing, I mean, I've said this before, but like, I want to be inspired always. I mean, it's a little cheesy to say, but that's why we set up shop where we did, where, I could take my dog for a walk in the morning and like, just in my face, there's like a 14,000 foot plus mountain staring at me and crazy clouds blowing by every morning and just, the river ripping by. Like I like seeing those things to always feel invigorated and inspired, but also I love seeing what everyone else is doing. And I don't care if they're small or making beer or whiskey or knives or whatever. Like it's so neat seeing expression in that way. And then if I ever, like I had some guy, this kid who came out and, chewed my ear off, or not chewed my ear, like wanted to talk to me forever. And then I was going down to, it was actually like a tasting event not too far from here. And he asked if he can come with me. I was like, yeah, man, you can come with me, or whiskey, whatever. He hit me up and he's like, oh, hey, I'm working at, I forgot what distillery in Scotland. He was like, I don't think I would be here had I not had that conversation with you. And I looked down, I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like if I can have any part in pushing someone forward, whether it's like they took a sip of something I made and they're like, whoa, that's interesting. Maybe I'll try this. Or somebody's distilling whiskey now because I nudged them along. Fuck, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's the best.
So
huge.
This is what we've been sipping on for a little bit. And this is 100% malted barley. Anything unique on that grain?
So the grain bill is damn near the same it's been since day one. The very first batch we milled, mashed, and fermented and distilled was at the very end of 2011. So the approximate grain bill within like 1% is 80% two-row pale malt, and then just about an even split of chocolate malt, Crystal 45, and Crystal 120. So like special B, so like a very raisiny malt. So, we mill, and when you mill barley to make single malt, you're not crushing it into a flour. You just break the kernels into a few pieces and leave husk. You mash at 150, all that starch converts to sugar, and you slowly let the liquid that's like this thin oatmeal consistency filter out. So we're leaving the grain behind. We go into an open fermenter and we pitch M1 yeast, which is actually a malt yeast. We used to use a bourbon yeast, but the M1 just kind of worked a little bit better. It lent some nice confectionery notes. So we pitched that at about 70 Fahrenheit, let it sit for 4 to 5 days. And then we double pot distill, take pretty narrow cuts like most craft distilleries do. And then we go into heavy toast number 2 char barrels for, like I said, the label says 2 years, but it's no less than 3 years these days. So mostly a blend of 3 to 4 year that goes into these bottles.
What I get off of this is, and this is your fat guy tasting note for the evening. It is like a chocolate chip pancake with blueberry syrup.
I could see the blueberry syrup.
I like it. right, so I was gonna do mine too. Oh, go ahead, Jolie.
No, I just love how bright it is. Like I love like when I first tasted it, it was like citrus, like right away. I mean, it was, and then the second time I went, and then I drank what I poured, and then going back to it, there is like a cocoa nut, nutty on the empty glass.
Yep. Yeah. So I was gonna say if Toblerones and Raisinets had a baby.
Drew,
That's awesome.
what is with you and your tasting notes tonight? You're like right on.
No, it's just what you said. The honey, the nutty. There's some citrus. There's some darker, dried fruit notes. But that cocoa or that chocolate note just hammered home to me, especially on the finish.
Yeah.
That's delightful.
Yeah, it's super good.
One of the things that I love to geek out about, and I think not all, but a lot of distilleries do, I think, is like with an open fermentation, which is pretty standard for whiskey, bourbon. You're allowing the introduction, of native airborne flora, and it's a lot of lactobacillus, and that lactobacillus that imparts organic acids over time in the barrel, like I would say anywhere from like the 2 to 4 year mark, starts kicking in different fruit notes typically. And I get like a lot of, Jolie, you brought up, like the fruit notes. I get, on some of our single barrels in particular, not necessarily every blend, but I always get like a lot of peach, a lot of tangerine, like that. I think that is, in a sense, the house flavor that we get from the lacto that's in the air where we live. But what is it if we made the same whiskey in Denver? Maybe it's strawberries. I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
No, that's cool.
So we're going to pour the Honeycomber, which is Progeny 3, American Single Malt finished in an X mead cask.
Yeah.
So
I'll give you a little heads up on this one. Yep. First of all, just to cut to the chase, I bottled this one. I want to say it was like at 102. I probably should have bottled it like 98. It could use a tiny bit of water. So if you guys have water, it could use a little bit. But it works on its own too, so it's not critical. Worth knowing about our Progeny series. This is where we get to screw around and do fun things with other producers. So the concept is it's an annual release, a collaboration with other Colorado makers.
Nice.
Has yet to be another Colorado distillery, but in this case, it was a collaboration with Redstone Meadery, who I've been a fanboy of since they started forever ago. They do amazing stuff. Mead's a funny thing, First of all, it sounds like meat, which it's not meat. It's honey wine. You take honey and you ferment it, and it's a longer fermentation than beer typically. These guys, I ran into their owner Dave at the Rocky Mountain Cigar Fest. Awesome event, cigars, whiskey. It's actually next weekend. And I said to him, I was like, dude, I love your stuff. If you ever wanted, X whiskey barrels to put meat in, I'm your guy. And he was like, yeah, maybe. I was like, they're free. And he was like, I'm in. I was like, I just want them back when you're done.
Yes,
so
right.
for years, I would just bring in barrels, and then they call, and I go get them when they're done, and I put single malt in them. So just to give you an average, because some of them went longer, nothing went less than 2 years in our standard barrel profile. So that's like, we'll never pull anything younger than that to do a finish on, but sometimes pull 2 year stuff. Then it went no less than 2 years in X mead barrels, but some of them went 3 to 4 years in X mead barrels. So just over the course of time kind of varied. We blended them all together, and we actually, I'm pretty positive what I sent you was not our current release that's out on the market, but the extra 6 month aged, because we returned it back to barrels. So tack another 6 months on there, but pretty outrageous stuff. Like when you're putting whiskey in a barrel that had honey in it, it's putting whiskey in a barrel that had fermented honey in it.
It's interesting. You guys tell me if I'm wrong here. It's like a build on the last one. There is like a sweet teriyaki or some kind of sweet and savory combo thing going on with this that I really like. And I'm not sure if I've parsed it down enough, but there's something in there that sweet savory combo that I am loving.
I agree that it needs like a couple of drops of water to calm that heat down a little bit.
Yep.
Oh, I'll put some water in it.
It opens up
against
a lot.
everything you stand for, Kevin.
I mean, if I got it right, I would have put a little of the water in before you got it in the bottle. But, maybe that was a little bit of ego. I was like, I want to do 102 proof. I don't care.
I thought you had it right, but if you want to put a little water in it, we can do that too.
I mean, water's easy to add. It's hard to take out.
Yes, very hard to take out. Yes, and Joey mentioned the viscosity of, I think it was the rye. This is that way as well, if not more so. It is just thick and sticky legs on the glass.
Yeah,
it's gorgeous to watch as you drink.
This has been a fun one. I think the whole series for me is interesting because I get to, one, I have to plan ahead a lot. But we know what we're doing. It's not necessarily like a little book or what's Wild Turkeys, like Master's Keep or something? Don't they have one that's like
Master's Keep?
Okay, yeah. So
you're right.
I don't know that they don't pre-plan it way ahead, but these are, like I have to start them 4 years or more before they happen. So I think the next one is a collaboration with a winery in Colorado called Carboy Winery that's doing some pretty awesome stuff. And it's kind of we'll see what comes together, but it's a mix of like, currently we've got options to pull from, like our single malt aged in there. They do a cider, so it's aged in their cider barrels. We also put single malt in their Albarino barrels. We also distilled brandy out of there. I'm going to get this word totally wrong. Jolee, you might know it. Like Gewürztraminer or something like that.
Gewürztraminer.
Okay, thank you. That was way better. And I said it.
Just say girls are meaner.
Oh, thank you. I'll never forget it. So we made brandy out of that. And then we took the brandy out and put single malt in those barrels. But maybe we'll even blend some of the brandy in. I don't know. Wouldn't be a whiskey if we do that, but it's Progeny 4.
Very cool.
We did another collaboration with a brewery where we came and they brewed their imperial stout, but they didn't add hops. So it's the same grain bill, and they had cacao nibs and stuff. Now that's sitting, just so many weird projects that are.
I love that.
I want to drink all of that.
I know. I love that. I'm sitting here thinking so we podcasted a few times together, Lenny, I think on the ABV network. I had zero idea that this is what you guys were doing. I didn't know that single malt was your thing. I thought you guys were making bourbon. And I had no idea that you guys were so creative and so open to doing so many different things like that. I love that. That's what I love about craft. That's what I love about the craft industry, is the creativity in the distillers. This is fantastic. I love it.
I mean, I've never been officially diagnosed, but I'm quite sure I'm way too ADD to like we make one whiskey and that's what we do. No, it's like every day. It's
right. It's got to be something different.
Yeah, and I have such a good crew now. I have over the years, but Mike, who is my right hand, it's so fun working with him and being like, sometimes I'll say something. He's like, I don't know, but if you want to, fine. But usually it's just like upping the ante of like, what if we did this? What if we did this? What if we did that? It leads to such fun stuff. And that is like, not to be dorky, but that to me, I mentioned before the show that like I'm no musician, but I always think of like how these things come together. Like, how does a song come together? How does an album come together? And it takes, could be a solo, but it always takes someone else, whether it's like a producer or an engineer or something. And it's just fun to have other input, but throw crazy shit at the wall and see what sticks.
Are you guys are all of your barrels going to just your blend or being released in your tasting room, or do you guys have a single barrel program?
We do a single barrel program, but it's like, it's not that broad reaching. One of the things that needs to be fixed this year is our distribution's pretty limited. Like, folks say this up all the time, like, how do I get your stuff? I'm like, you can't. There's nothing worse than saying that. You kind of can. I'll save you guys the boring. You all know the laws that govern it and why it makes it so difficult. But we're very distributed in Colorado. We really need to start looking into other states, and we're small, so we might only have 200 to 500 9-liter cases to go into another state with. Yeah,
but you sell online through your website.
Thanks.
Deerhammer.com. Yep.
Yeah, that is true. So we do. And the only rub there is like, if people are listening and they're hopping on right now, typing in deerhammer.com, we can't sell it to you. We can't ship it from our distillery. We have to sell it to a distributor in California that sells to a liquor store in California that then ships to your door.
Yeah.
So if you pay $78 for a bottle of American Single Malt that might cost $60 here, I'm super sorry. And I'm trying to fix that as soon as possible, but it's just, that's the laws. And we're looking at some other states. St. Louis is coming on the radar real soon. I'd love to find a Kentucky distributor. If anyone's listening to a distributor, hit me up. Yeah,
we might know a few people.
I was just going to say, I'm going to send you, there's a couple names that we could send you for sure.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I love doing single barrels though. You know, I don't know about like at Spirits French, like, but what we do is like starting at about 2.5 to 3 years, like I'll taste through all our barrels. And we do a very weird thing as an aside. We don't use a thief. I use a straw. So we have all silicone bungs on racks, and we just like have like, I don't know, 6-foot straws, and we just stick in the barrel, take a sip, spit it out or not.
That's okay. Patoka Lake Winery, when we thieve from our blueberry port barrel, we use a turkey baster.
Oh, nice. Yeah, but
the country.
Anytime we hit a barrel that we're like, whoa, this one's extraordinary. It gets like a little spot spray paint, and we write like one food word descriptor on there.
Nice.
And this is, again, just fun stuff for me. So then we pull those aside, stack them all up, and see where they go over the next year or 2 years. But those are our single barrel candidates. And it's kind of fun. Like if we wrote like Milky Way or Peach Cobbler, well, in 2 years, does it taste the same? Maybe, maybe not. But that's like a fun way to see the process.
Right.
Yeah. So
that's cool.
Okay. So on the Honeycomber, on this Progeny 3, any other thoughts on that? I think it's just extraordinary.
Yeah.
And I love it. It takes that, you still get the base of the single malt, but it does bring that honey into it. It brings that the mouthfeel of that to it as well. I think it's great. And I've had, I think, Progeny 2. I was able to try it as well.
Yeah.
Last year or something, and it was great. So
yeah, they're all fun projects. It's just lets us be off the wall and kind of weird without, you know.
Yeah, I love it.
Forever.
Okay, what's next?
So much.
The last one we've got is this port cask finish. So we're going to pour a sample of that, and I've got another question for Lenny to kind of connect the dots here.
Side note.
Yep.
I have 2 side notes. First side note was the cornflower blue of the American Single Malt label is gorgeous. Second side note was, and I don't know why I didn't say this beforehand, but I've been thinking about it the entire time. Have you guys ever had Pachuga? Which is,
I was just talking about that.
So Pachuga is a mezcal that is distilled with fruits, and I don't think that has vegetables in it. Fruits, herbs, and then they hang chicken inside of the still and cook the chicken. The vapors all cook the chicken essentially, and so then you get all of that. Your bourbon reminded me of the smokiness of that. I think when we said mead and meat, so that's what kind of made that thought process go.
I mean, because I get like a broth kind of note on it.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a similarity to that. Yeah. Yeah.
So the brisket kind of falls in line with that. There's a whole line of them. Like, I don't remember I think it starts with an O. They cook goat instead of chicken in it with the mezcal, and then it's another expression. We started getting into
pig's head.
Yeah, there's all kinds of them, and they have like these little. They have a bunch of different. It's that, like I said, side note. There's a whole conversation there we can have, but your bourbon reminded me of like cooking meat. That I don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say. That's what
I've gotten that tasting note from folks. In fact, this guy Eric from Distillery 291, they're just south of us in Colorado, or east actually. I remember so clearly he was tasting and he said, it's kind of meaty. And I was like, I get that, man. You're not wrong. That's there.
Yeah.
So the question that I had was, how does music play in to what you do? How does it affect or inspire what you do as a distiller? How does it fit in with what you do at the distillery? Do you have live music there? How do you connect what you do to the music side of it?
I mean, there's a couple ways. Like, so I'll answer a few of your questions because you're spot on. So yes, we do have music at at our tasting room, which our distillery and tasting room are together. Our barrel rack house and bottling are separate. They're a mile away. And I spend most of my time at the rack house these days, but like we've got, apparently there's a band that stopped by today to play. We had a really good jazz band from New Orleans playing the other day. You know, we have a mix. Every once in a while we have a band that sucks and that happens.
Sure.
You know, what do you do? I try my best to vet them. But I really enjoy it because to me, something I've been thinking about a lot, and I guess I thought about it from day one, was like, just like I was saying, I want to make whiskey and kind of put it out there for people, and then I get to step back. It's the same thing with our distillery visitor experience and tasting room and our patio where we get to have music. You know, so we've had some phenomenal bands. We had this guy, Cousin Curtis, this spring, and I didn't know who the guy was. I paid him more than I pay most bands because I really like the sound of what he was putting out. But it was one of the coolest experiences I've ever had in my own distillery, where like the guy was just fire, and like people were walking down the street and just like hordes of people were like flowing in.
Yes.
Because it was just that good. It was like the best party of the year. And you know, when I can just sit down in the corner and listen and like see everybody having the best time ever.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite things for sure. But that's the visitor experience part. And I love that.
Right.
But then you flip it over and there's the, you know, we're going through I mean, we don't have that. We've got like 600 barrels maybe stacked up. Well, not a ton. And sometimes we have more, sometimes we have less. But when it's time to taste and blend, one of the things I've taken to, this was kind of a bored during COVID thing. I was like, you know what? I need a turntable. Like, I want to play vinyl in this place.
Yep.
So it's come to like, I don't know. Whenever I travel around, like, you know, on the Front Range, like Denver, Boulder, Colorado Springs, if I find a shop, whether it's a record store proper or just a place that has a few records, it's always fun to flip through and find something that I might have heard of, I might not have heard of, but I like cycling through that. And it could be anything from like, I don't know, like, Wu-Tang is currently on there, which isn't classic, but I do like listening to Wu-Tang.
Wu-Tang is for the children.
This is true. But yeah, you know, like, or prior to that, John Denver was on there. I never really listened to John Denver, and I put the album on. I was like, this guy blows, and I gave it a while. I was like, you know what? Actually, it's good. It's really good.
Right.
So, okay, you and I are right about the same age. And so I grew up listening to John Denver because my mom loved John Denver. Mom was in the Papas, John Denver, Peter, Paul, and Mary, like all of that. That's like when I think of, and Barry Manilow. Sorry, Kevin.
Yeah, I heard somebody.
But Cindy is the big Barry Manilow fan.
I know. Right? Me and Cindy. But I love John Denver. And like, there's just something about him. I correlate Colorado with John Denver too. But the feel of his music, and whenever I've been in Colorado, I'm like, yes, you know, like, I don't know. I feel that vibe.
I mean, I believe he's from Roswell, New Mexico originally, but that's not too far away. Right. And I agree. He's become the archetypal Colorado,
Rocky Mountain, whatever that song is.
Rocky Mountain High.
I'm a huge fan, obviously.
The biggest.
Yeah, I think it was Joe Walsh was Rocky Mountain Way. So
right, there you go. Yeah. Yeah.
Man,
I don't
this
know. I just love
forecast-
that. He's like
Sorry,
that Willie Nelson country before like Shania Twain stepped in and, you know, ruined everything. But I just, that old school like country sound that wasn't twangy, but it was more folksy, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I follow you on that. So yeah,
Jolee,
like,
we're
I
gonna
like
have
throwing
to have a
different-
talk about Shania.
Yeah.
Listen, I already admitted to you that I love pop music. So I love Shania Twain, but you can definitely see like a hard right around the time when Shania Twain started coming in. She started turning country music pop. And now there's country pop is a whole other category. And then country is considered like twangy, you know, check me for ticks kind of music.
Well, okay, but okay, Shania took country music to pop. All right. So
Yeah.
follow me on this.
Okay.
And so she was kind of leading that charge. She
Yeah.
was putting her thumbprint on country pop, like
Yeah.
Lenny put his thumbprint on American Single Malt. So there are going to be people, they're going to come down the road here in the next few years. They're going to make crap single malt, but Lenny's still going to be there doing it the right way.
Yeah.
Lenny is the Shania Twain of single
You're
malt.
basically the same person.
What?
That's
I don't
probably
know.
not what you want to put on your advertising, Lenny. But
Unfortunately, I feel like that's going to stick with me for a long time.
We need a new sticker.
Shania Twain is the single malt of what? I don't.
Lenny is the
We can
Shania
let that
Twain
go.
of single malt.
Lenny
If-
is.
Yeah, I don't know that I would want to see him in tight leopard pants though,
I don't
but
know.
maybe so. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know.
I can't get over this portcast finish. I'm sorry
Yes!
to distract
Back to the
the Shania
Yes,
thing.
please
but-
get the show back on track, Drew. Thanks.
Yeah, no, man, there is such a beautiful balance in this of fruit and then dark aromatics. It goes from that peach thing on the nose to like a plum or a prune, and then there's some leather.
Yep.
There's still that rich smokiness, and you I don't think you've shared the mash with this. Is it the same grain bill as the American Single Malt? Just
Yeah, it's
finished in
identical.
pork?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah, we'll pull it
that
to
oak
3 years.
smoke thing, man, this might be. I don't know. I'm kind of in love with your bourbon. I am a self-admitted bourbon bro, but this is a standout of the night to me in terms of the complexity. The viscosity is there still, but this one has a little bit of a sharpness to it that I really like. It kind of cut through what was left on my palate from the last two, where it was that oily thing. This one just kind of hits me right in the sweet spot. So yeah, this one maybe the standout of the night for me.
That's cool to hear. This is a very fun one for us. It started out as like a seasonal release. We were always running out, and then we finally, once we had enough single malt, maybe we're like, let's stop running out. Let's divert more. Let's bring in more port barrels. So here was our approach to it. It again was a scenario of saying, well, what's done? Why are they doing it that way? Can we do it a different way? And the big thing that I was hearing out of Scotland from a lot of the single malt producers was, and I'm not going to replicate their accent and all, but they were essentially saying, they'll take their single malt and they'll speak very grand of it and bring it into a sherry cask or a port cask.
Right.
And I heard one of their brand ambassadors once discuss how, if you had a beautiful like mahogany bar top, you would never paint black over it. You would make sure the mahogany shows through.
Right.
And that was his way of saying, don't let it sit in these like new port or sherry barrels for more than 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So we took a different approach and said, well, that's a cool story, but you guys make very delicate single malt. Like you have very tall pot stills. And, you age in Scotland in used barrels where there's not a whole lot of wood interaction. I love this stuff. I'm not hating on it, but we do something very different. We use squat head pot stills. It's big flavor. We use those, specialty malts that bring in a lot of character. We use light char barrels, but heavy toast. So we want all of that is to make big flavor. And if we're just going to put it in a port barrel for a couple months, like I have some now that have been there for 6 months. They're nice. I like it a lot better when it's a year to 2 years, or in some cases longer. So this stuff starts out, I'll always say minimum 2 years, because again, we'll never pull anything less. A lot of times we're starting out with our 3-year single malt. Then it'll go into export barrels, which, you know, a long time, like when we first started doing this, if there was some port in there, we were like, yeah, it'll have more port flavor. Kind of not down with that anymore. Now we dump everything and make sure it's like, it doesn't have to be bone dry, but I'm not trying to just have port in whiskey. I want the wood interaction.
Right.
So we'll go into those barrels and we'll let them sit for years. I mean, in this case, it's been in export, and for the most part, it's tawny port, whatever that's worth. But it's been in there longer than it's been in New Oak. And I like
less than a finishing and more of a second maturation period.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's about trying to find that balance of like, we've got a pretty robust profile in our American Single Malt. How do we balance it with those fruit notes? And Drew, I agree. Like, I get a ton of plum. I mean, obviously you get fruit from port barrel, but like the plum notes and the leather notes, like they stand out so much. And I want to turn out something different.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
But it doesn't overwhelm the single malt, and that's the key. You get those other flavors blended into it, but it is truly blended into it. It is not, wow, this tastes like I'm drinking a port with some malty flavor in it. This is well done.
Well, a lot of that is a blending exercise too, though, because some are fruit bombs, some of the barrels, I should say. Like you taste, you're like, whoa, it's awesome, but this is fruit punch. Others are a lot of leather, you know, others are high in tannin. And that again is where we get to say like, okay, well, you know, again, like we don't have all the barrels, but we have, you know, like 16, and some are first fill port, some are second fill port. It's enough that we can be like, okay, well, we need 6. So what are we going to do? And this January, we'll probably buy 6 more port barrels. It's just, it's a fun evolution and blending experiment and fun experiment.
Can I ask a question on that? So once it goes into the port cask, how frequently are you tasting to achieve that balance between the single malt flavor and the port flavor?
Not frequently, in the sense that we're looking for like the high point, saying like, okay, it hit the best part where it's ready to be pulled. It's more of a like, we're going to let this ride. And if we're not ready to pull it, it's going to keep going. But we know that we're always introducing, you know, over the course of a few harvests per year, if we empty a barrel and then it's a second fill, or even like in some cases a third fill, I'll say third fill is like, there's not a whole lot of fruit influence, but we might put half of a third fill in to tame down some of the characteristics. So
got it.
Yeah. It's definitely a blending project.
Oh, that's cool.
I love to put a couple of drops of water in my whatever I'm drinking. I love to drink it first, swirl it. I kind of do a Kentucky Chew type thing. And then I always love to put a couple of drops of water, because I feel like it opens up things that, for me, it opens up a lot of the grain flavors will come out more. So I put a couple of drops of water in this, and that port came out so much more. You could really taste that there was a wine, I don't know, kind of hug there that I really, really enjoyed a lot. I thought it was great without the water, but it opened up that port, those port flavors to me. That plum that you say is definitely more there. It's hard for me to decide if I like the American, not that the mead wasn't great, but it's between the American Single Malt and this port cask finish, which one I like better.
Yeah, it's I like your style on that. I know of some distillers that are insistent on asking folks tasting to put water in a few drops, and that's cool. I do that too. I kind of replicate your same process. Yeah. But I always like, you know what? It's in the bottle. I like folks to taste it that way. And if they and if they don't want to mess with it, all good.
Absolutely.
I do like to flick a few drops, and it's very rare that it's ever happened where I'm like, whoa, get out, you know, like
right.
It might not lend too much, but sometimes it does.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we've had Lenny here for about an hour and a half, and I don't want to take any more advantage of his time or impose on his evening any more than we already have. But man, this is this has been fantastic in terms of learning more about you and what you're doing, and then tasting these different whiskeys and 3 different single malt that are, you know, the same base whiskey, but what you're doing with them in terms of the mead cask and the port cask and even the standard American single malt, you're creating 3 incredibly unique and delicious flavor profiles here that man, and just your willingness to experiment, to try things, to, hey, let's try this, let's take a chance. You're just going to get some really incredible stuff here.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love it.
Thanks.
I love your attitude towards it.
Yeah, I do too, Lenny. I'm just blown away. I had no idea you were doing this kind of shit. I love it, man. It's so creative, and so I love how open you are about the process, and I love how like you said, you and John kind of riffing on each other. I think that is what craft distilling is all about. It's all about who you're doing it with and what you're doing, and I agree. If you're not having fun, then what is the point? And you can tell you're having a good time with this whiskey. You really can.
I mean, I think every distillery, for the most part, it's got to be a passion project. You know, there's got to be the business side for sure. But if you don't care, then what are you doing? And that is one of my favorite things. You know, I was talking earlier about inspiration. Being out here in Colorado, you know, and I love Kentucky. And there's probably some states I don't love that I haven't figured out yet. But I always find greatness where I try to find the great parts of everywhere. But what I really like that's happening in Colorado right now that's been building over the years is like you've got this you know, like kind of like type of distiller or business owner or whatever, but these creative people who they came out here for whatever reason. And like, for me, I came out here to go snowboarding when I was in my early 20s, but a lot of, almost all the distillery owners did, like whether it was like, you know, skiing, snowboarding, or mountain biking, or running through the mountains, or hiking mountains. They all came out for a passion, and they brought that to the whiskey they're making. And of the, I don't know, there's like 90 DSPs out here now, maybe more. There's so many cool things. There's occasionally you'll find like a snooze fest, but there's so many cool things happening. And I guess like anyone listening, you guys, Colorado's not the easiest place to visit distillery to distillery in that you got to drive a bit. It's a big state. You're going over some big mountains. But the upside is you're driving through some beautiful mountains.
Right.
Yeah.
And I love having people come out. Like if anybody's wanting to come out, Lenny at Deerhammer.com, come out. I'll hand you a straw and we'll drink out of the barrels. But whether it's
you guys, what are we doing here right now? Why are we not like planning something? That's right.
Look,
that's right.
We'll get Drew out there. He can sing a little bit, and I think that's something we've got to make happen, because I've been out to Colorado. This was before I was really into whiskey really big, but I've got to get back because I need to visit Deerhammer and some other places. But a lot of great things happening out there, and you're at the forefront of it.
Yeah, we've got some great folks for sure, and it's such a good community of like, you know, creative people making delicious stuff.
Yeah. So where can people find you on social, Lenny? I know that you got deerhammer.com.
On social media. I've been pretty slack over the last month, but I'll kick it back in gear. So at Deerhammer, mostly Instagram, a little bit of Facebook, a little bit of Twitter. And then our website, deerhammer.com. You can order our stuff there. And if you holler at us on social media, I'm getting it, and I'll always answer if you got a question or I don't know, whatever. I want to know what album we're listening to. It's probably Wu-Tang, but it could be something else.
Probably Wu-Tang. All right. Jolee, how about you?
You can find me on Instagram at the Testarossa. I'm on Facebook if you are into Facebook. I don't know. Most of my stuff is on Instagram. Twitter sucks, so I'm not on Twitter.
Yeah. Speaking of Twitter sucks, Drew, where can people find you?
Yeah, I am on Twitter at Drew Crawley 63. Kind of being a jerk most of the time. Snark
That's
is
why
my
Twitter
love
sucks.
language. And then on Instagram at drew.crawley63. If you do follow my music, that's where you can find the majority of the stuff, dates
Yeah.
and new releases and all that jazz.
Okay, speaking of music, you've got a big show that is coming up Friday.
Yeah, Friday. So I'll be playing one of my first full band shows here in Louisville. So that'll be over at O'Shea's in the Highlands for those that may be listening. And got the boys coming out, the Wild Boys. We're going to be causing all kinds of mayhem. And then we'll actually be playing a Saturday show as well for a cancer benefit over at J-Town Beach that is open to the public. There's all kinds of ways that you can donate, and all the proceeds from the bar and the food on that day will be going for a kind of a it's not a GoFundMe, but it's a similar kind of a thing to help with medical expenses for a dear friend of mine that was recently diagnosed with breast cancer. So if you're around Louisville, we're going to be out partying way too hard and playing rock and roll. So yeah,
Awesome.
Come on out.
Awesome. Hey, for us for this show, you can find us on YouTube. Go over to YouTube, hit that subscribe button like Mike told you to at the beginning of the show. You can listen to the show. You don't want to watch the show. Okay, I understand that if it's just me and Drew, but we've got the lovely Jolee, so you need to watch the show. And we've got Lenny Eckstein, the Shania Twain of American Single Malt, so you want to watch that as well. But you can listen to the
Lenny.
show on your favorite podcast platform, as long as it's Apple, Spotify, or Google. And we're on Facebook as well, a little bit on Twitter, but we're nice, so we don't do a whole lot on Twitter. So, hey, Lenny, can't thank you enough for being on here, brother. This was a lot of fun. We will have you on here again, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed you.
Oh yeah, man! Thank you guys for having me. It was great.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing all of your creations, all of your little children, your babies. I love them.
I was gonna send more, but I felt like it was over serving.
Well,
Kevin is just gonna keep it all. So
no, I'll get some more of this out to you guys. I promise. And we're gonna do an American Single Malt show sometime later this year, and we're definitely gonna have you involved with that if you're willing. So, on behalf of our lovely guest host Jolee and our regular host Drew and myself and Lenny, cheers, love, Freebird.
Cheers, guys.
Good night, everybody.
good night.
Good night.